All right there. Good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LaBeouf here with you. I got Dustin Dodery, Brad Vandalite. And again, thank you for joining us every Thursday, 7:30. We go live. You can also, don't forget to, wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcast, don't forget to check us out, Education of a Weaponized Man. Subscribe, follow, or on YouTube, Awaken the Protector Within. If you would like to, if you prefer to watch the episodes, don't forget to subscribe there as well. Listen, let's jump into it tonight. So tonight's episode I titled Shut Your Mouth or I'll Shut It For You. This could go, we were talking just before we went live here, we were having a quick chat, and I said that tonight's topic could go a few different ways, but I got a very specific kind of focus on this, right? So once again, I called this Shut Your Mouth or I'll Shut It For You. So let's throw out a couple things here before we cut to the intro. Everyone's heard the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Also, people have kind of heard that if when you find yourself in a confrontation, especially with multiple opponents, if you take out the fucking biggest mouth first, right, the rest tend to follow. You know, cut the head off the snake, the body dies. There's lots of little sayings or acronyms. Now, if we apply this to the whole concept of shut your fucking mouth or I'll shut it for you, okay, I'm going to actually zero in on how this applies to mass attack tonight, right? Because there's two main problems with that age-old concept of you take the biggest fucking mouthpiece first or take the biggest fucking dude first and then the rest just kind of fall into place. So we're going to cut to the intro back in a few seconds and we're going to go deep. It's going to be a great podcast tonight. Hang with us. Every day I hear more stories of good people being brutally assaulted and murdered by some individual who has a repeat history of violent offense. I live, work, and where I am raising my two daughters. Well, I'm tired of screaming at the TV, and enough is enough. Throughout history, there have always been men willing to answer the call to the threats against our way of life. Well, today, that threat is right outside our doors, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, on our public transportation system, outside the places we work, and even outside of our children's schools. My new mission is to create and train a group of men that believe in the right to life and value the freedom a man has to protect his life, his family, and his property. I'm Greg LaBeouf. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, guys, we're back. Okay, so tonight's episode was Shut Your Mouth or I'll Shut It For You. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways that we can actually go with this, but I actually wanted to talk about it as it pertains more to mass attack. And if we add in a tangent here or there, if something kind of resonates with you guys about this, then feel free. But again, I want to keep this to mass attack for the most part. So again, I think most men growing up, you know what I mean, you got this kind of fatherly advice, quote unquote, which was, if you ever find yourself in a situation where there's more than one guy, take the fucker with the biggest mouth, right? Take the guy that's doing all the fucking talking. Sometimes that, take the biggest guy, fucking knock him out first, like nail him, he goes down, the rest follow. Now, I mean, it's not that this is a completely factless kind of piece of advice. That has merit to it for sure, because there are times, absolutely, when the individual that's doing most of the talking, he's doing the threatening, he's doing the most amount of posturing, that individual is potentially the biggest threat in that situation. But that word is exactly what I want to cue in on, the biggest threat, right? I have just listed very, very quickly two main problems with the whole concept of zeroing in on the attacker, right, that has the biggest fucking mouth, that is doing the most of the talking. And I just want to really clarify something, right? Because when you guys are probably going to say this at some point tonight too. When we're talking about, when you're facing, two or more guys and the one guy that's doing the most talking, we're not talking about antisocial aggression, right? We're not talking about, three fucking drunk frat boys who are arguing and talking shit. Paul used to say, we're not talking about three librarians arguing over the Dewey Decibel System. Like, it's not like that. That's an altercation. We're not interested in that shit. What we're talking about is violent predatory criminal assault. So we're talking about high-level threats where it is reasonable for us to believe that we are facing imminent grievous bodily harm or death, us, our family, other innocent people. So when you find yourself in a situation where you have three predatory criminals, okay, and they are posturing, right? So there is verbal discourse that is happening, in that situation, again, shut your mouth or I'll shut it for you. And the concept of, you take down the guy with the biggest fucking mouth, take down the guy that's doing the majority of the talking. That isn't always true. And the word that I said was the threat, right? So what is the biggest threat? But how do we define that? Every person has a different, kind of filtering system or criteria for what a threat is, or determining what the biggest threat is. Okay, so just visually off the top of your guys' head, what comes to your mind when we talk about, shut your mouth or I'll shut it for you, and maybe the problems that exist with that line of thinking?
I think it's one of those things that, because it is lessons that are kind of passed down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, do that. Like that's take the head off the snake, so to speak. It works until it doesn't. And the other thing is kind of more importantly is that it's like I think people are gonna put too much faith in that. Like if they believe that, if that's what they were taught and told and stuff like that, like they might put too much belief into that being the end all be all for a situation like that, without actually looking and having a solid blueprint for violence, violent behavior, and being like, well, what is the most tactical way to handle this situation? So I think it's a lot of those things is just, we be careful what you get good at. You might get good at the wrong thing. I think that also applies here.
Yeah, perfect. Dustin?
Yeah, I agree to your guys' point of just how this gets passed down. I think the first thing that hit me when you started talking about Greg was like, yeah, okay, like I think we've all agreed that yes, a lot of fathers tend to pass down that type of advice. But as you alluded to, it's like, okay, but where was that advice learned? It was for sure learned in antisocial aggression, not asocial violence. Like if they gave examples with that lesson, it was for sure crap that happened in school, crap that happened at the bar. It wasn't a violent assault. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think that's where an error gets passed down is again, once again, context determines the content. It's like it's advice about protecting yourself, but with no concept or talk about what context it applies to. So I totally agree that that's what's wrong with that statement for sure. And then as you kind of went on to talk about, is the biggest mouthpiece the biggest threat? And at the end of the day, it's like, well, that's it. Is it a threat? What is the threat? Well, that's interpersonal communication. It's only one of three things that we're looking at when we're assessing threat cues, right? The pre-incident indicators, the pins. So I was like, again, in mass attack, yeah, like the biggest mouthpiece, he might be the biggest threat, but you still have to go through all the pins to figure that out. The fact that he's saying the most stuff by no means makes him the biggest threat, but all the other pins that come with it, and if the other people don't have pins at the same level, then it is the biggest threat. But if the other quiet guy is sneaking around behind you, hands in his pockets, like, you know what I mean? Like, those are some pretty big pins. So they can't be ignored just because someone's talking too much.
Could be their tactic.
Exactly. The whole thing could be a bait, right? That might be the whole point of it. So it might be why he's talking so much. It's just purely a distraction technique while his friend or friends are, out positioning you without you necessarily realizing it.
Okay, so I said that I had two different main problems written down, and you just hit on the first problem. How many times have we seen, again, when you study criminality, right? Don't watch, like, I know that YouTube and fucking Instagram and all that stuff, they're filled with all kinds of, fight. Yeah, you can see drunken bar fights outside, like, all that type of shit. It's all antisocial aggression you see, right? Or you're seeing combat sports or whatever it is that floods your Instagram. Not as often, not as frequently do you see high levels of violence where people are losing their lives, all that type of stuff. The point I'm getting at is that when you study criminality, you often see the decoy being used, meaning that the person that does the approach, right? So the person that, remember, criminals want to bridge the distance. They're not looking for a fight. So when you have what we call a posturing predator, when you have a predatory, criminal, many times they can absolutely posture. It's status and display, right? So they're coming at you with what we call a tsunami of initiative, meaning like there's a very high level of threat. This is why a guy walks up and he's got a machete in his hand, or he's showing you that he's got a gun under his shirt or in his pocket. So he's showing you the butt of the gun, or maybe he's even got the gun in his hand. But he's not slashing you with the machete. He's not shooting you with the firearm. But he is posturing, right? He's overwhelming, overpowering, out equipping out-positioning, and when possible, outnumbering to try to get a cognitive disconnect. Those 5 ingredients, most people don't understand those 5 ingredients are key. Every single violent assault has those 5 ingredients in it. And so they don't always have all 5. Bad guys want to bring as many of those 5 as they possibly can, because if they do, and to the greater degree that they bring those 5 different ingredients, is the more likely they're going to be successful in their assault. Well, posturing predators, right, they've learned through innate experience that when they don't value life and when they threaten, right, when they genuinely posture at a very high fucking level and they have, the tools and the positioning and all this shit, that they often kick the good guy, quote unquote, into fucking submission because they just simply cognitively, physiologically overwhelm him. Because most people haven't been in a life and death altercation. Most people have never had a machete fucking pulled on them. They've never had a knife pulled on them. They've never had a gun pulled out on them. So they're like, their brain gets a cognitive disconnect and they get caught in this submissive pattern, right? Or just, fight, grossly overreact, underreact, or freeze. Okay, so in that situation, they'll have oftentimes the first contact, they'll bridge the distance. And so the person that is the bridge is the decoy. He's the guy doing the talking. Whether he's just trying to, get your shields to drop and he's trying to get a conversation going so that they can get closer to you, right? Under the guise of, hey man, hey man, you got to smoke, right? They're just making small talk to bridge the gap. Or the guy comes up and he is the one issuing threats. He is posturing. But what he wants is he wants all of the attention on him. He wants that cognitive rubbernecking. He wants the tunnel vision. He wants all of that zeroed in on him. Because as you already alluded to, Dustin, because then the other guys can flank attack. They can approach from whatever angle they want. The guy is not seeing what they're doing. He's not scanning the hands, just all of the different things. So oftentimes the guy that's doing the most talking is an indicator. It's a PIN, pre-incident indicator, that tells you need to scan. Something else is going on potentially. So not everything is as it seems. Okay, so that absolutely is one of the first most critical things when you just get caught into this, shut your fucking mouth or I'll shut it for you. Now, you guys can expand that if you want to, but right here I think it's really good to put in, I said that this title, Shut Your Mouth, has a couple different meanings. One, as we're talking about as it pertains to mass attack, is that the guy that's doing most of the talking, the guy that's issuing the threats, the guy that's the biggest fucking mouth, it might be that he wants the spotlight on him. He wants your attention. Okay, so that's one. He's the decoy. The second thing that we can look at this, the second angle, is us personally. And when I say it, I titled it Shut Your Mouth with a little bit of a subcaption, or I'll shut it for you. Well, let's break that down. Every man has his boiling point. So, typically as we get older, we get wiser, we have more emotional intelligence, we're more regulated, meaning, at 53 years old, I'm not worried about getting into a fight. When I take my kids to and from school and I'm out grocery shopping with my wife, I'm not worried about getting into a fight. What is this, fucking high school? Would it be junior high? You know what I mean? I'm not like some guys are going to start hurling insults at me or my wife and I'm going to, oh, motherfucker, what'd you say to me? That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about violent criminal assault where people are targeting you, wrong place, wrong time, all this type, way more serious level shit. But at the end of the day, if you're a guy, you can, if you're honest with yourself, and you guys answer this for me, I believe, I'll speak for myself first. I can still see a set of circumstances where a motherfucker can push my buttons. You know what I mean? Like you just get to a point where you're like, my boiling temperature might be much, much higher than it ever was, especially when I was in my 20s and shit. But you can get to a point where people are so good at pushing fucking buttons that you hit the spot where you go, you know what? Fuck, that's it. Shut your fucking mouth or I'll shut it for you. Like all of a sudden you have that visceral emotional reaction, which we know is not good for a lot of reasons. One, now you're reacting. Right? They're throwing spears. The reason they throw spears is because they want you to throw spears back. Because it's so much easier for them to engage you, it takes two to fight, so to speak. And so you start being reactive, you lose strategic and tactical control because you start making emotional based decisions. So this is just a side tangent on it, but this is why the inner control box work is so fucking important. And it's like while somebody's talking, my brain isn't really listening to what he's fucking saying. I'm actually busy running a threat assessment. I'm doing a preliminary analysis. Is this guy legitimately the biggest threat? I mean, he's the one doing all this talking. He's the one that's saying this and saying that. Or is this a fucking decoy? And this ties into what both of you had mentioned. But there is the pre-incident indicators. What is the body language telling you? What is the communication patterns telling you? What is the behavior patterns telling you? These are the three areas that allow you to read true intent to harm. Is it there? Isn't it there? Right? Is this a threat? And what level of threat? Those two questions have to be answered. Okay, so, I mean, that's a side point, but just give me your feedback on that emotional part of this as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that you're right with the point. And the thing that maybe I'll add to that, because it made me kind of think about it, was we all have life factor moments, right?
Yeah.
And we want and do the best that we can to be able to have our inner control box and regulate. But sometimes you get caught in a life factor moment. And that life factor moment could have happened a few days ago, and you're still in it. You know what I mean? So it's like we're not immune to that, right? So it is something that is very much a reality. But with the weaponization process, is at least you have something to work. You know what I mean? Like you have an inner control box to negate a lot of those things. But yeah, it's not like it can't happen because we're all human.
Yeah, I literally was talking about this with Shane, one of the other guys we train with, driving home from training, I think only last Wednesday or something. And I forget how we got onto the topic, but I distinctly remember saying to him, I'm like, I can definitely see and still feel like this tiny little part of me where if something was happening, and again, not even so much in the asocial violence, but if we're talking like where you get not sucked in, you end up in some sort of, an antisocial aggression situation where, ego, I think it's not like a there or not there thing. It's a scale. And I think everybody comes into training, obviously somewhere on that scale. And through training, you're always trying to get down to the lower end of that scale, to not let things like ego get in your way and impair your judgment and let emotion get out of control and take control. But I was like, I can definitely, in the theater of my mind, I can create situations where I can feel that wanting to bubble up. And it's like, there is always, I think, just that lifelong challenge of keeping it as low and as out of the picture as you possibly can. But for sure, there's times where that'll start to come up for different reasons too. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's just capability. That's what I was thinking about. I'm like, when you're capable of doing a lot of things, and from a self-defense standpoint, then it is sometimes harder to just be like, just let it go and walk away, because you could do something. Do you know what I mean? So it can get a little bit gray sometimes. So yeah, it is an ongoing thing you have to work and be very aware of, for sure.
Yeah. I think too, like, I made that as a side tangent because at the end of the day, we're not perfect. Like, you can sit up here and, we're talking about this and doing this 30 years. Like, we're just people. You're people working a process. And the realities are that we're emotional creatures. You feel first, and those feelings become thoughts, and your feelings and thoughts impact your actions. And every man has a boiling point. Every man has a pushing point where you start going, fuck you. Like, you crossed the line. Right? And the line between self-defense and punishment is thin. And you have to really be aware of that, and your training has to account for that. So I wanted to bring it up because also I think it's real fucking clear for people that if all of a sudden you zero in on the motherfucker that's doing all the talking, this guy that's in your fucking face, the guy that's saying everything about your wife and your kids, the guy that's got his hand in his fucking pocket, right? Or the guy that's, threatening to fucking murder you or do whatever, threatening to rape your fucking wife in front of you, all this shit, and you got 2 or 3 of these guys standing around you. I mean, it does not take much for a man. Like, at first, there's a tremendous amount of fear in these situations. There's always a certain amount of realistic fear. Let's be honest. There's going to be some fear. But at a certain point, especially as it starts to become like, okay, this is going to fucking happen, that fear can turn to anger. And all of a sudden, what happens is you just get fucking tunnel vision on one fucking guy who may, in fact, be the decoy. This is exactly what they want. I mean, let's think about this from the vantage point of the fucking criminal. if I'm going to go out there and start assaulting people, if the three of us are going to go out there and start fucking beating people down, robbing people, just doing whatever the fuck we want to do because we just don't give a fuck anymore, then how are we going to do that? Well, every single fucking time I'm going to distract them. I'm going to have someone's going to be the decoy so the other two, the two of us can fucking get behind him, get whatever the fuck it is. He's just never going to see it coming. Why? Because I don't want to give him any fucking chance. Right? So I'd be decoying all the fucking time. Because how does the good guy, how does he discern that this is a decoy? How good does the decoy have to be to get all of that attention? I mean, he doesn't have to be that good. I mean, it's not hard to be fucking rude, inappropriate, racist, fucking aggressive and violent and just really make, fucking get that guy to snap in and focus in on you. And the second that this guy's caught in that tunnel vision, most people don't have any type of training. They have no fucking situational awareness, right? That's something everyone likes to talk about, but people don't train it. You know what I mean? Like people think situational awareness is when you are calm, relaxed, and a million miles away from a crisis, you're paying attention to stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's good practice, and you should always be paying attention. But people go like, I go to the mall and I people watch. Yeah, well, it's easy to people watch when there's no threat. But the second you got a threat in front of you, the second you got a threat coming at you or your wife or your kids, or the second something's happening, fucking people cognitively and perceptually fucking narrow in. They get caught in tunnel vision. Unless you have fucking training or unless you have some sort of predisposition. Like, depends on, like, certain types of jobs demand that people keep a very global or, local type focus where they're in and out. But on average, most people, they lose it. Which is why most people make shitty fucking witnesses. I mean, a crime happens right in front of people and people can't remember fucking whether the guy was wearing a jacket or not, what color the shirt was. You know what I mean? The decoy is one of the things where, we don't want to focus in always on the guy with the biggest fucking mouth or the guy that we think viscerally is the biggest threat. You actually want to have a much better threat assessment process, right? Which is what we call the PIN index, which means you got to learn, if you don't know what a PIN index is, pre-incident indicators, then you have to train that. You have to study that. You have to be taught that. You have to practice that. Otherwise it won't be there. Okay, so that's kind of number one. The second thing the second main problem with this whole concept of like, I'm just going to take down the fucking biggest guy or the guy with the biggest mouth. Let's just do benefit of the doubt here a little bit, okay? Let's say that you have the PIN index. Let's say you have a real world functional threat assessment capability. Why and how? Because you're taught that, okay? So it's trained, okay? And so you actually recognize that the individual that does in fact have the biggest fucking mouth, and actually this guy does constitute the biggest threat to us. But here's the other thing as it pertains to mass attack and why it's very important not to have this myopic kind of thing of like, I'm just going to take out the biggest motherfucker and the rest of them will, at least that's done, they'll fade away, whatever it is because it may not be the right firing solution. And now if you don't know what I mean by that, we're talking mass attack. And if I'm talking mass attack, I want everybody as you're listening to this to instantaneously, just in the theater of your mind, wherever you happen to be, I want you to picture three bad guys. Picture a threat from three serious individuals. Okay? Now, when you're picturing them, you're picturing the proximity from you, you're picturing, you know what I mean, like how they're standing, what the configuration is, all of this type of stuff. And now what I want you to do is pick which one of them has the mouth. So make one of them the biggest fucking mouth. Make him the biggest fucking threat. What most people would do in this situation is they saw probably all three guys standing in front of them. Well, that's pretty convenient. And the next thing, when I say make one of them the biggest threat, just so happens to be the guy that is most conveniently positioned to be punched first or to be engaged first. Isn't that convenient? Right? Because our brain goes, well, I got to take out the biggest fucking mouthpiece. So obviously when you start thinking about this scenario, to no one's surprise, the mouthpiece is right there in front of you. And so you're like, yeah, I'd fucking crank this guy. Now, that's clearly not what we would do. I'm not talking about the strategies we would use. We use very different strategies. But what I want everyone to have a conceptual image of is that you actually have to create a firing solution. Meaning, one of the concepts that we work is when you have, let's say, two or three guys. It can be more, but let's just keep it simple. Let's just say 2 to 3 guys, okay, whatever you want to image. they are going to end up in whatever proximity. There's going to be a myriad of different configurations that they can end up in. You might have the mouthpiece standing right in front of you while you've got one of the other guys standing very close to you and slightly behind you, let's say behind the left shoulder. And so in this moment now, people might switch and say, well, yeah, the guy in front's doing all the talking, he's the biggest threat, but the guy that's kind of, slightly beside me, he's more of a danger, so I'm going to take that guy first. Listen, the reality is, though, you're completely ignoring, when I say a firing solution, you have to actually assess your angulation and weight distribution. Meaning you might be caught when they come up to you and approach you, where's your weight? Where's your balance at? If you're standing facing a guy, which they tend to draw attention, and from what I've seen from most people, is when somebody talks to them, they tend to actually body orientate to the person addressing them, especially when it's a threat. People tend to stop doing what they're doing, and they tend to turn and look at the threat or what they perceive to be the threat and say, hey, what's going on, guys? And they get engaged. Now, maybe their head turns and they look and they see the guy standing slightly behind them, but the center line is still facing the guy in front of them. And this is because they've never actually trained or weaponized their weight distribution. They've never actually weaponized weight distribution in conjunction with fighting off at geometric angles. Like if you look at combat sports and you look at, let's go at boxing. Boxers have a very specific fighting stance, and they move at very specific angles specific to boxing. And within that, they practice evasiveness and they practice counter-punching and all this type of stuff. But they're fighting off, for the most part, standardized geometric angles and range as it pertains to the sport of boxing. That's the framework of boxing. When you look at even Thai boxing or kickboxing, those angles are similar but different because now all of a sudden you have the ability to use your feet. Okay, now if you look at even MMA, you'll see a wide variety of fighters. It's not too wide, but you're going to see differences because one might be more of a ground fighter, and his whole mission is to want to clinch up and put the fight on the ground and to really avoid any real serious striking in the stand-up position. And vice versa. You might have got a guy that's stand-up and is trying to avoid the ground. Well, you're going to watch him, his weight distribution, his geometric angles, all of these things are going to be different. And that's a tremendous amount of training to understand how to fight off those angles, how to control that range. So now if you can go just one step further, what's that like in a mass attack situation with violent predatory criminals who are armed, right, out-positioning you, out-equipping you, prepared to overwhelm, overpower, and outnumber you, and don't give a fuck about life. They don't value human life, and they may enjoy murdering you and your family for nothing more than the sheer entertainment of it. Now start to look at how you configured, how did you see yourself when I said imagine 3 attackers or imagine 2 attackers? Were these attackers conveniently placed? So they're standing in front of you and you're standing so your weight distribution is absolutely perfect for just unloading your ungodly powerful strikes, which I don't know how you developed it because most people don't train, you know what I mean? But that's still the image of what they're going to do. I'm going to knock you the fuck out. Be careful, man. I just black the fuck out. I mean, that's the extent of most people's plans. So they don't have any training in that. And, for our purposes and for the guys listening that train with us, I mean, this is where we spend the work in what we call the Trojan horse. And the Trojan horse is falsehood preceding reality, nonviolent presentations. But the bigger part of that, right? So the tip of the iceberg, what you can see is nonviolent presentations, right? Making sure that we're keeping all the stuff. But when you look under the water, the mass of a Trojan horse strategy, the tactical, techniques that come with this is managing distance to manage the damage, meaning understanding how to drift, how to control range, and how to control your weight distribution. And at first, we teach people to do that against one. How to break center line, how to activate tools, how to, again, nonviolent presentation, and then how to actually engage and set the weight transfer and set up the body mechanics so that it's non-telegraphic, it's ballistic, it's all these things. But all of a sudden, the second you got 2 or more, most people go, well, you can't really engage multiple opponents. You can't, you can't really get them all. But it's like, well, that actually isn't true. But there's a higher level, training that goes into this. And that's, angulation and weight distribution and understanding how, just like a boxer, when you box, your jab, as your jab extends, it loads the cross. So as the jab is recoiling, the cross has the ability to be fed out. Each punch synergizes the next punch. So if it's a jab to a cross, to a hook, to an uppercut, these are not disconnected punches. These punches are all being synergized by weight distribution, by the right synergistic combination of body mechanics. This is why they call boxing the sweet science, because there's a science to this shit. And so stands to reason that just because we're talking about violence doesn't mean we're fucking a bunch of cavemen here. Like, there is very high level strategies and tactics that go along with this. And so one of those things is the firing solution. Now, that's a bit of a tangent, right? But I actually almost kept talking to prove a point. And the point was this: there is a whole lot fucking more that goes into what needs to be done when you're facing multiple opponents, besides just take the biggest guy, knock him the fuck out, or take the guy with the biggest mouth and take him the fuck out. Hopefully people can start to understand that that's like, I don't even know if I'd consider that kindergarten. I think that's preschool. But what you need in today's society, shit ain't getting better. You need a fucking PhD in violence. Right? So does that all make, I know it makes sense to you guys because you live this, but what parts of that stood out to you guys?
It's one of the things that straight away comes to my mind is, the old saying is like, everybody has a plan until they get hit with the truth, and it's like, it's kind of like we have that perception. It's like, yeah, like, everybody could close their eyes and they could image this thing and they could run something on how they perceive it going and see themselves performing in a certain way. But it's like, if you don't know the theater of operations, if you haven't put the work in, especially when you're talking about mass attack and multiple opponents and like against not just, like you said, a couple frat boys, but people that want to do destruction upon you, then, like, what you think is going to happen, not likely to happen. That's just hope. I hope that it goes the same way it goes. It's in my head, but the reality is that you need a solution. You need strategies, you need tactics that are going to allow you to, survive situations like that. Can't just be a hope and a dream.
Yeah, I think I'll just kind of reiterate your point, Greg, that I think the whole undertone of everything you just went through was to kind of show people that it is such an oversimplification to just take out the biggest mouthpiece. Like mass attack, any violent situation requires a lot more respect, thought, study than something like a comment like that. But mass attack is like a whole nother level of difficulty when it comes to keeping yourself safe. So yeah, I think, like you said, like the reason you went on, into all of that, kind of deep into the weeds, is just to kind of show people how important training is, and that it's not as simple as just a one trick pony. Here's your solution. You'll be fine. Just do this. You're good. Like, it's so much more complex and convoluted than that. And the only solution is training it, studying it, and fully understanding what that threat really is.
Yeah. I think as and maybe with this, we'll kind of start our descent onto this topic. But I hear this all the time: KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And it's an immutable concept. It's a very true concept. It absolutely needs to be applied, especially in the context of training for violence. Hell, in most things in life, that is what really that should be the goal, is to keep things simple. But the reality is that violence is just a tool, and it is a tool that is about one thing and one thing only, and that is destruction. And here's the thing: Destruction's not hard. It really isn't hard. But there is a depth of study into even the most simple things that you have to put that time into it. You don't have to, I guess, but really, I'd always marveled at guys like Paul Vunick and stuff, and some of the, Ron Baliki, these guys that I met that were just phenomenal combat educators. And every one of them, although they're just world-class instructors, their level of instruction, their quality of instruction pales to the level of fucking ferocity these guys have. I mean, these guys they're fucking warriors. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I've just been around it. They're absolute, when they flip the switch, they're absolute killers. And one of the interesting things with this, though, is that the shit they do is so fucking simple. It's so easy to understand what they're doing and why, like to get the context of it all. But at the end of the day, when you're behind the curtain, as I was so blessed to do for so many years, you get to see the amount of fucking intense hard work that goes into it. And it's kind of a weird thing. How is, just keep it simple. Destruction is easy. It's not complicated, so don't make it fucking complicated. But at the same time, you can train it to the highest fucking levels. And that's kind of with this whole idea of like this mass attack. It's like, to learn how to do a true threat assessment isn't hard, but you got to work it. Like you got to work it, and it's only when you work it does it truly become KISS. Does it truly become, keep it simple, stupid? Just that level of just base raw predatoriness. You have to reduce it. And I think I've used this analogy before, like cooking a sauce. You got all these different ingredients in it, but you got to fucking reduce it down to make something that is completely its own thing. Like, so even this idea of like, not focusing in on someone just because they're the guy with the biggest fucking mouth or the biggest dude or whatever it is. You actually have to do a threat assessment. If it turns out that is the greatest threat, then that's what it is. But at the end of the day, also, you have to figure out a firing solution. There is an order for how you're going to be able to go. It's like, what is accessible? And this is what we do. Like, you have to gain access. If you don't have access, direct access to whoever that biggest threat is, then he's not going to be the first guy to go because you don't have direct access. You might have to go through two guys to get to that guy. Then it's a matter of saying, well, how quickly can I do that? And if you understand what you're doing, you can do it very, very quickly and very efficiently to the surprise of almost everybody involved. And then you really better be keeping it fucking simple. Because if you got to get through two guys in the most expedient, brutally efficient manner possible so that you can get to the third guy and still catch him by the fucking surprise, right, and try to get a tactical jump on these guys, right, then shit has got to be simple. And that is where you have to understand how to manage range, right? Manage the distance to manage the damage, and how to fight it off geometric angles. And you got to learn it against multiple opponents. It changes it. And it's not hard to teach people. I had a guy last night, this is what got me thinking. A client came in, and I mean, literally took me half an hour to teach him how to do the weight distribution and to, and he's like, fuck, I never even thought of this. Like, he had no awareness of angles and how that pertains to the complexity of having two or three and oftentimes moving targets where shit's in flux. Your firing solution is changing because the range is changing, movement's happening, drifting's occurring. And yet, by the end of the session, he got the concept. Now it's just he's got to put the work in. Now it's flight timing. I don't need to teach you nothing new. Now we got to work it. So that this very simple strategy, tactics, and tools can actually be weaponized and brought online, and that's where the work comes in. And so hopefully, again, I just with this podcast wanted to share with people that destruction's easy. I mean, my favorite analogy that sums that up is you could probably get 10,000 people to come in, give them a slab of raw marble and give them some tools. And the vast, vast, vast majority of those 10,000 people could not create something like the statue of David. They're not going to create anything that has any real value or worth to it. The handful that do, the handful that can really take a raw slab of marble and create something, beautiful out of that, it's going to take them years. It's taken years of training and skill development. It takes years to hone it and finish it and all that type of stuff. Give me a 12-year-old kid with an attitude, I'll give him a sledgehammer in 2 minutes in that room, and he'll turn that fucking masterpiece to rubble. It often takes far less than 2 minutes. Destruction's fucking easy. Building something is hard. And when it comes to weaponization, when it comes to training for violence, it's not hard to destroy things. If you find yourself in a situation when you're legally and morally justified, facing imminent grievous bodily harm or death, and what is required is potentially the need to take life to preserve innocent life, that means you have to destroy something. You have to destroy that threat that means to wipe you off the face of the earth. Destruction's not hard. Okay? But getting to the point that you can do it with that type of precision, where you can make that process truly simple. That's the work. You got to put the time into developing the skills. Otherwise, untrained people, it's always labor. It's always harder, right? Because you get what I mean, right? So, anyways, that's kind of some of the core concepts I wanted to share with people. Again, when they think about mass attack or they think about threat assessment, look a little deeper, right? Don't let your brain just automatically, it's not T-ball. I go, yeah, take the big guy. He's the big guy standing right in front of me. It's all just works out perfectly. Yeah, it's how it works for John Wick. But we might not get 3 sequels in our movie. Okay. Any final thoughts from you guys, or any other points you want to make on this?
No, none from me. No, I think we covered.
Dustin?
Yeah, I agree. I love that analogy. The community art piece versus I don't think you can sum it up better than that.
Okay. All right, guys. We're a bit of a shorter one today, but that's okay. I know it's been a long day for everybody. I just appreciate everyone that again joined us here tonight. Every Thursday night, 7:30 we go live. Again, please, if you have questions, you have topics we'd like to cover, that type of thing, let us know. We love hearing you guys' feedback and sharing that. That's it, everybody. I want to thank you guys. Please do us a favor. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, follow, comment, share. That is where and how we grow this community. We're not trying to reach the masses. We are looking for very specific people who think like we think and believe like we believe, that a man has the right to life, liberty, freedom, and security, and he values the freedom to defend that life. And our whole mission here is just to share different insights into the process of how, the process that the journey we've all taken, which is going from that quote unquote ordinary guy to a weaponized man. It is needed now more than ever in our society, in our families, in our communities. So we just genuinely appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you guys. That's it, everybody. All right. Until next time, stay safe and chat again soon, everybody.